is these additional 10 sessions of neuromuscular and strength training make a huge difference down the road. So it is typical quiet knee plus, right? That's what I would talk about. And we use perturbation training for R, which is, disturbing the support surfaces. But you could do any kind of progressive neuromuscular lower extremity training. It does not have to be the perturbation training. That's just how we standardized it in our hands.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
So let's move into, I think that's a nice segue into the early phase of rehabilitation. And I think one of the most challenging things, or the things that certainly I remember from physio school was drilled into me, was do not do open chain knee extension exercises with these people after an ACL reconstruction. Can you please share with us your thoughts on open chain knee extension and early phase rehab?
That is another great question. I'd like to kill that sacred cow right now. There is no reason to avoid doing open chain knee extension after ACL reconstruction. And that means even on day one. People have been talked about the strain on the graft and use that as an excuse or a reason actually to not do open chain exercise. Well, the studies out of the University of Vermont in the 90s actually showed that open and closed chain exercise have the same strain, somewhere between 3 and 6% in that range, depending on how much weight and the range of motion through which they're doing this, okay? Every time your patients take a step, the strain on the ACL is 13%. So if you're letting them walk, you can do open chain, you should be doing open chain quad exercises. If you let them do closed chain exercises, you should let them do open chain exercises. It's the same strain. And that strain is about a third to a half of what happens with every step that they take.
So does it matter? There's no restrictions on the range I can do these exercises through. There's no restriction on the resistance that I can use.
Oh, but you would start, obviously you're going to start light and work up as they tolerate it, but no. At least there's no evidence. There's no evidence that says you shouldn't be doing this. In fact, the preponderance of evidence is in the opposite direction. And you know, and I know, and everybody who's out there knows, we see these patients coming in all the time that have been cleared to return to sports, and they're 6 months out, and we measure them and they've got a 60% quad deficit. You know, Matt Ifburn's work that's been coming out at Laura Schmidt, the group from Ohio State, they've published several papers from this cohort of kids that came in when they were cleared by a health professional, and then had them sought to see how many of them passed these return to sport batteries. It's like 20%, something like that, 25% that have been cleared because no one ever looked. They didn't measure. So don't get me started on measurement.
Oh, we'll come to that, don't worry.
Yeah.
So I think the message here really is about strength, 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 quads, quads, quads. And I think you might have coined the phrase quads are queen or quads are king.
King, yep. Quads are queen, quads are king, quads the magic muscle.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I think one of the other things that sometimes can be challenging early in rehab is getting those quads going again.
Yeah.
And certainly you've published a lot on neuromuscular electrical stimulation, NMES. Yep. This is something, again, when I was going through physio school, this was something that we learned a little bit, but certainly wasn't emphasized. Can you share with us, we've had quite a few questions about what's NMES, when should we do it, how, why, what's the rationale? Can you share some thoughts about neuromuscular electrical stimulation?
Sure. So that I really got started in research because I really wanted to know why people's quads shut down after knee surgery. Like, I couldn't figure out how someone would go in and have a meniscectomy and the next day they forgot how to use their quads. I mean, you'd ask them to do a straight leg raise and they bend their knees. And you're like, what's going on here? Where's what's happened to this connection? All they did was take a little piece of something out of their knee and their quads don't work, or they can't work their quads. So stim is a really good way to get the quads like woken up, I guess. You know, inhibition is a big part of the early strength loss after knee surgery, any knee surgery. So if you can get that, if you can stim them early, you can really help get that information back to the brain. Yeah, this muscle does work, and help them volitionally be able to do it. So we do it right away, first day after surgery, and we continue to use the stim till their quad strength 80%. So that'll be an integral part of our treatment all the way up to when they have 80% quad strength. So
and is it just the quads? You're not stimming the muscle?
No, just the quads. And when we do it, you can, there are two different ways that have shown high intensity stim plus exercise being better than exercise alone. And one is if you can stabilize them in flexion in a dynamometer where you can actually measure the electrically elicited torque or force. Okay, so you're actually looking at the screen and you're turning up the dial and getting it to, I mean, the threshold is about 50% of the MVC. Okay. And then,
sorry, MVC being maximal
voluntary contraction. Yep. Force. So that way you can know the dose isn't this electricity, not the milliamperage, it's the electrically elicited force or torque. But if you don't have that kind of a setup, Kelly Fitzgerald published a paper in, again, the early 2000s, where they just got the strongest possible contraction, that tolerable contraction with the knee in full extension on a treatment table. And that also was better than exercise alone. So, I mean, there's no reason not to stim the quads. And I think whenever you go to the people that I really admire that are out there doing a lot of really high quality continuing education, people like Mike Reinhold or Kevin Wilk, they're going to tell you stim the quads, stim the quads, stim the quads. It's just the best way to get things going.
And it's really interesting that you say you stim until you get to 80% limb symmetry. Again, it's like, I think that initial thought is you're just using stims to get the quad going, and then after that you very quickly getting them into a leg extension machine or doing some ordinary strength training. But this sounds like you're using stims for a lot longer than perhaps what people might be expecting.
Yep, we are. Again, that's just following the research. It's at least, at the very least, you should do it through the early phases. But in our hands, at our clinic, at Delaware Physical Therapy Clinic, we do it till they have 80% strength.
Okay. All right. So let's move, I think, from some specific early phase questions and go and shift a little bit now to the return to running, because I think this is one of the earlier milestones that people find is important but can be a bit of a challenge. So what are the criteria that you use in Delaware for return to running after an ACL reconstruction?
Okay, so there'll be some now I'm going to talk about a couple different things, and as we go to return to sport, which we're going to get to, excuse me, there are biological milestones and, of course, intercurrent injury, right? So there are people who rehab really, really well, and they're strong and have a quiet knee, and they want to start running. Just because they meet the criteria, we're still going to hold them time-wise because we really do want that graft to heal. So the main criteria that we have are 60% quad strength. No, at least 60% quad strength, a quiet knee, full range of motion, no effusion. Okay, and we use a sweep test. a manual sweep test.